Yes, yes, yes. And I'm just going to set this up so everybody who takes pizza's got to stay for the discussion.
I'll stay.
Okay. Ray, I know you will, Ray.
You're gonna stay.
Okay. And I apologize. So as people are filing in, tonight's discussion is probably a discussion that would be best if we were like sitting around a big table, and I don't want to rearrange the room, so we won't do that. Okay.
You can rearrange yourselves.
Yeah, but you can rearrange yourselves and sit, on the end of tables and do that. So the reason I don't want to rearrange the tables is they all have locks on their wheels, and they are a pain in the butt. But what so this is Tom Morgan. Tom, you are the executive officer of the Rensselaer IDEA.
I was in charge.
Yes, that's right. So
if it hadn't been, I would have been an innocent bystander.
So first of all, welcome to the second to the last TWed of the spring 2016 season. As you know, next week is our TWed lightning talks, and I'm sure all of you have signed up and know about this well, and I will pester you from every day until next week anyway, so you will sign. Lindsay, are you going to do a lightning talk? Maybe. So what we're going to do tonight is, so as most of you know, because you've seen the announcements, last Saturday and Sunday was the 2016 IDEA Datathon, the Institute for Data Exploration and Application. And this is IDEA's second annual Datathon. We had 17 teams of between 2 students and
2 to 5.
Two students to 5 students.
75 students.
We had mostly undergraduate teams. We had hey, don't walk away with pizza, man. We had some pure, mostly undergraduate teams. We had a few pure graduate student teams. And we had, I think, a couple mixed teams.
And we had mixed undergraduate teams too, where they weren't all say freshmen, sophomores.
That's right. Yeah, a mix of different levels. And we upped the ante this year with a top award, first prize of $2,000. How many of you participated? I see some faces participated. Yeah. And you survived. You lived to tell about it. And so what we were, what we wanted to do tonight was discuss the experiences and observations with this with the Datathon, and it's wonderful that you guys are here. That's fantastic. We also wanted to talk about just in general this approach that's sort of encapsulated by a Datathon of discovering data, learning data, developing a question based on the data, and going about very rapidly trying to prove a hypothesis.
There's 2 things that I'd like to try and discuss, plus anything else that comes up. One is the format of the Datathon, and then the other would be the type of data and the challenge that we issued against it. Just to review for those of you who Mary was in both of them. I'm sorry, you were not here last year. You're up there. You were there last year.
Yeah.
So last year's format was pretty straightforward. Everybody showed up Saturday morning. They got the data, they got the challenge, and they worked until middle to late afternoon, and we had the judging. This year we spread it out a bit. We had the initial session Wednesday where we introduced teams to the data, told them what it was without actually giving them the data values, so that they could do some planning of what they wanted to work on and what kind of a hypothesis or whatever they wanted to come up with. And then they had all day, and then we gave them the data Saturday morning. They had all day Saturday, as much time as they wanted to spend, until noon on Sunday. And then at noon on Sunday, we reassembled over at CII where we were having it and spent an hour and a half finishing up the slide presentations and then went into the judging. So there was more time to actually do the work, and you got pre-introduced to the concept. And the data itself was from the World Bank, and it was what they call their World Development Data Sets. And there's two big categories. One is what they call governance data, which was expert opinion, subjective evaluations of 200 countries, and they basically rank them from best to worst on six different factors, things like rule of law, political stability, those kinds of factors. And then the rest of it was your basic statistical information on labor, population, health, finance, military, agriculture, things like that. And the general idea was to the students was, the challenge was, can you use data from both sides of that, the objective statistical data and the subjective opinion data, to formulate a hypothesis that you can either prove or disprove via your analytics. So that was the basic challenge to the students. For those who participated in it, and especially someone who participated in both, what do you like or not like about the overall format?
I thought it was much better this year since we had a short intro session beforehand. Because last year we had a lot of trouble just trying to formulate a question with the data that we had. So this way we came in with a question, even though we ended up changing it maybe like 3 times because we couldn't find data. Ideally, we would have spent a little bit more time in those few days before the actual competition started that we'd find data, but we just didn't take that time. So I think the quality of our presentation was a lot better this time around because we had that time. So we're able to get better conclusions because last time was so rushed.
Yeah.
So I think that was a lot better this year.
Well, I think we certainly recognize the fact that teams were rushed.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the data itself, what was your experience in the usability of the files that we provided this year versus last?
Yeah, so we had to transpose, I guess, the data. There's all the years from as what's in the column. So we had to condense it and transpose it as the year as the umbrella header. So that was the only issue we ran into. So that took maybe 20 minutes of actual hard labor, but it wasn't too bad.
Did you use any? And did you do any direct downloads from the site, or did you use the pre-downloaded? One of the issues last year was that the Yelp data, the college data was for the whole country. The Yelp was only for a few selected major metropolitan areas, and I think we had trouble with some of the teams. It took them a while to discover that, and part of the problem was we didn't realize it ourselves. And there was no way to find that out from the Yelp site, actually. Anyway.
Did you find, so we provided both the data sets and also metadata files. Were those helpful?
I don't think we did. Yeah.
The metadata was only useful if there was a category in there where you didn't quite understand what they were talking about, because some of them were very terse.
Mm-hmm.
Or you couldn't figure out what the dimension was, and that's all described in the metadata.
I think we used some of the more obvious factors like the control of corruption or life expectancy, things that we already kind of understood.
Yeah.
So we kind of strayed away from the ones that we didn't.
Yeah, there was so much that was easily understood.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you who only competed this year, are there some things that you would do differently in terms of the format? I mean, would you allow more time, less time?
With this one small thing, I'm not sure why there was no question and also session for time around.
Oh, you mean of the presenters themselves?
Yeah.
Well, speaking from the point of view of the judges, we had that during the first round. So we did ask questions, and even though all the judges obviously didn't judge all the finalists, all the teams who ended up being finalists, we all discussed the presentations as we were selecting the finalists. So during the final round, I guess nobody asked any questions. It wasn't that they couldn't. I don't think that they felt a need because we were already pretty familiar with what was going on.
So just to be clear, the issue was in the final round, there were no, there was,
Nobody asked any questions in the final round. I don't think we specifically said you couldn't.
it just didn't happen.
It just didn't happen, yeah. Now, another factor in there was time, and that was, I mean, the reason, yeah, this is another thing that we would like feedback on. We limited the presentations to 10 minutes.
That's good.
And there were two reasons for that. One was we had to get through a lot of presentations. We didn't want everybody hanging around till midnight. But the biggest reason for 10 minutes was to force you guys to really focus on what you were going to present. And in general, it worked. If I was going to give a 10-minute presentation, I would have had 10 or 12 slides. I'm pretty sure most of the groups have one. But that's a personal preference. If you can comfortably get through more slides, then fine. It's just now in the second round, of course, all the students got to see the presentations, and I think that was valuable. You can argue with me, but I think it was valuable for the students to see the presentations, not just for the content, but see if you could follow what they were saying and understand it. In other words, was it comprehensible? Was it too rushed? Were there slides that just had too much stuff on it that was irrelevant or not, or just too crowded? Because seeing that kind of thing really drives home some of these points. For those of you who have not been in any of the Datathons, your thoughts on format or the types of data that you might suggest for this kind of an event?
For me, I volunteer for the field.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't participate in that is because, well, frankly speaking, I'm not doing it.
Okay.
So it's not. So it's not. The reason it's not because I'm not here is because I think I can't use my expertise in solving the problems. I have seen people presenting, they have dynamic visualizations, presentations, interactive stuff, which really eye-catching. Also, they use pretty much all of them using the learning stuff, which I took the course, but I kind of forgot it because it's like 3 or 4 years ago. And my expertise is around the semantic technologies, which also deals with data, but does not use any models, probabilities, stuff like that, to solve the problem, to find the correlations. And on the other hand, my expertise is more focused on streaming data instead of static data. So you basically have like historic data, like random stuff, which not that relevant to my kind of interest, and that's why I didn't participate. But I was trying to discuss like the solutions that each group presents, and I was trying to dig out the kind of the secret. But it seems like the way I think is so different in terms of solving the problems with machine learning techniques. So it's not possible for me to get any positive relations to this factor and that factor together because of some factors.
Yeah, that's a good point, and there's certainly a built-in bias towards students who have taken or Professor Bennett's data math course or one of the other courses that introduces you to the basics of analytics methods, and the students who've had those courses have tended to do better. And I mean, and we had talked, John and I had talked about this before the meeting about different categories, and this is a different way to look at it. We were thinking, right now we've been trying to find data that kind of has a wide appeal, with students from all different disciplines. Perhaps as the event grows bigger, we could have one for engineers and one for social sciences and one for biomedicine or something like that. And also things like cognitive computing and some of the different ways of approaching this. That's definitely, and I'm gonna have to explore some more maybe offline with you on how you would use the type of data that we had in the event, if you could even do anything with it.
I was thinking about this, and ground level, if I were doing anything like that, I probably will recommend some sustainable format to database and provide some type of model, something about it. That's probably the way.
Well, there were two, when we were choosing the data, there were two basic thoughts that we had in mind with what we selected here. One was that you could essentially use the objective statistical information to see if you could prove or disprove the validity of the opinion-based data. How good were the opinions? Were they consistent? Whatever. The other was, and this is why, even though the opinion data was only from 2004 to 2014, the statistical data sets went all the way back to 1991. And there was a very good purpose intended there. That was to give you the chance, if you so chose, to use the earlier years to see if you could predict either a trend for a country or a region or whatever in the opinion data. No one chose to do that, and that's fine. But that's why some of that data was there. It was in the form that it was, and maybe kind of things you're talking about might be suitable for those kinds of exercises.
So I saw the finalist that the first of the matter valid and then we lost the
Yeah.
At first, I was thinking why they do that because they valid their result. So what? I mean, so maybe apparently giving like the time limit constraints is not try to do some very communication. But I was thinking if the server is valid,
And there's, the reason for having, a very short time, and I want to get to another option here in a minute for Datathon, just having it over a day or a weekend like this it's as much about project management as it is about data analytics. And very frequently the teams who do the best are the ones that can really manage their time and not and quickly converge on something useful and then focus on it. And that is so key, just in life in general, but it's so key in data analytics, especially when you get these ginormous data sets. How do you quickly get in there?
So I wanted to ask a question. So you guys said you changed your hypotheses a couple times, right? I'm just kind of curious about how you did that efficiently and how you interacted with the data to.
I wouldn't say we did it efficiently. We changed our idea like the day before the presentations up until like 8 o'clock, which is when we got our final data set and then formulated our last hypothesis.
We had therefore hypothesis. I think the issue we found was the data was a bit difficult to find. There's a paywall or.
Oh, so you had hypotheses that required.
Yeah, we asked for the
outside
Twitter
data.
historical data.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember because you were faced with paying $800 for something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Even
So
if you won first place, it was a big chunk.
So that is I mean I didn't say it, but that in some ways that's an area of research. I mean it's so the people that do research that uses Twitter data in depth, they do one of two things. Either they've got infrastructure that they've set up to collect it real time, to hoover it up, or they have agreements with companies that do that. So they get it donated or whatever. But it's tough. But anyways, I interrupted you.
Now, did you pursue these things in parallel? You said I had a couple of them initially. You just kind of have each person on the team pursue them for a little while to see how much progress, and then you kind of have a little competition and see which is the best to do.
Yeah, we did at times like you like, okay, but I can just actually you get things done. So that kind of you did kind of help.
It did work out very well.
Getting people to get things together. I think we ultimately decided on our data set in the end with the refugee data because it fit the format of what we were given.
Yeah.
So that helped a lot. I think we might have oversold these.
Yeah, so the first problem we ran into was trying to historical data. Then we had a second hypothesis where we got data which was at the state level, but wasn't like aligning with the governance data, so we scrapped that hypothesis. And the last one was the refugee one, which we eventually went with.
I'm glad you mentioned overscope. That's a real problem.
How is it not aligning?
So it was the data that we were given was only at a country level.
Yeah, across the globe, and this was just US. So we wanted to correlate this view, but we couldn't really do that if we had like that granular level.
Yeah, the reason I ask is sometimes there's tricks to, the one data set's given in one way, and then you get this, you find an intermediate data set that seems totally unrelated, but you're able to link it together.
Of the teams that competed, what did you use to do your analytics? What platform?
Yeah, good question.
R and Python, so and Python.
And what influenced that? Is that?
So we all have the prior experience.
Mm-hmm.
So like Chris and I both took data analytics from Professor Fox.
Okay.
So we both were very familiar with R, and then Rob was really familiar with Python. So
Okay. That's like an ideal. That's like a perfect storm.
Yeah, we had a good mix.
Yeah. Oh, and so that's how you implemented that visualization.
That was actually JavaScript.
Okay.
JavaScript.
Okay.
But it was you formulated all the data for that in Python.
Oh, so you created like a JSON file, and then you implemented the graphics in JavaScript. Is that
We used a D3 library called Data Maps.
right?
It's essentially a JSON document that we built.
Right.
We formulated all of the CSV data using Python into what we wanted. And it was pretty bad. We just copy and pasted the values in because we had so much runtime.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
copy pasted in, and then the graph was turned good.
Okay. You didn't mark off for not having it live queries and stuff.
It's on it.
In terms of the format, is there any other feedback or thoughts that anybody else has on the format of the thing?
Yes, I have. I didn't participate.
That's fine.
In this one, but I the other one.
Oh, you were at the case study, the Molly case study.
Yeah. So I guess the format, it defeats the purpose of the datathon to have more than a day or two, which I understand. But probably after the result, after we present as finalists, I don't feel like a big need to give results immediately, because at times if you give results immediately, it's based on the impact factor of the presentation. If I guess what I'm trying to say is I was trying to compare this to other writing competitions of the sort, and I was trying to see how judges exactly validate. Is it just based on presentations and visualizations? How much time do judges really have, because you're going to give the results out in an hour, in 2 hours probably, to go back and validate the models that the people use, or find any flaws in the model that they had? Because I would think is it an opinion that forms when you hear someone present and you hear them present the result well, or is it like, I was just trying to see that, if you take a day or two, you could announce the results later, so that once you present it, you're done with the data fund, the participants are done.
Well, that's a very good point, and it's a deficiency that I struggled with, and I think the others maybe too, is there's very little opportunity for constructive critique and feedback to the teams. There's not a lot of opportunity for instruction, and I would love to basically sit down for an hour or so with each team and say, okay, this is what you did good, and this is, what were you trying to accomplish here, and just really try to understand everything. But again, in a short thing with a lot of teams and relatively fewer judges, it's really difficult to do.
If I could interject, though, I don't think that's the complete point. You're actually getting at the validity of.
Yes.
So I'm a great presenter, and I'm presenting this PCA, and it could be total BS, but I might be able to convince the judges that it's valid.
An example would be like, I'm trying to present, I have a map, I have the original points, I'm mapping the points over. For example, the points that I predicted versus the past data, the test data points. It looks nice in an interactive visualization, it looks really nice. How do you know that, what is the validity of, because it's a test data set at the end of the day. How do you know that it will apply to the real world? Or how do you know that model is really good, efficient as far as time goes? Because you run the model, probably let's say you run the model for 8 hours, it's a really bad algorithm, it takes long to run, and the next day you show static results.
So I think except for that bipartite example, so I don't think there was a lot of machine learning. There were people were generating regression models, certainly, and that sort of thing, but I don't think that there was the
Not a lot of opportunity for really sophisticated models.
right. So I'm not saying your point isn't a very important point, but what I'm saying is that particular example, I do think that I didn't see the interactions, but I think
calling me.
okay. So there's an opportunity during the question and answer to essentially turn that question around. Okay, so the judges, part of the responsibility of the judges is to ask when a particular model is presented to question the team on that approach, and they should be able to so there should be a built-in the question, so the team has created this model, and it is what it is. If they did it correctly, there is a regression line, whatever, there's that model. Now, they have to make the case that this is valid, that this proves, that this contributes to proving the point. And that's immediately, that's something you should know immediately. And if there's no...
I don't, all the judges have a tremendous amount of experience in this, and we all obviously aren't conversant in every different type of method that was used, but on each team there was somebody that, at least one person who knew this stuff, and that was one of the things that we did, as a judging team, is you would talk with your colleagues, about these sort of things. And I'm not terribly concerned that the judges might have, I wouldn't say have the wool over their eyes, but missed something like that. I mean, there's always a possibility of something really subtle that it's tough to pick up. But I don't think that's a great thing. If there's something out there that doesn't smell quite right, it'll be picked up.
But it's a good point, though, and it's important to consider as we compose judging teams in the future, to make sure that we've got the balance.
Sort of compare it to like one of the Kaggle competitions that I know this happened was usually Kaggle. So what it does is they have a particular metric and certain thresholds that ranks teams according to the data that they put in, and that's compared with a part of the test data. Then they choose the top 5 teams, but they don't declare winners based on just that metrics. They take the top 5 teams, choose them, take their algorithm, run their model, test their model, run their own metrics later. So you're chosen as the top 5, but then if you're number 1 on the rankings by a certain metric, that doesn't mean you win the competition. After that, they take the top 5 and then they validate the model, they run the code, they choose the winner based on certain things that they want.
And that brings that kind of leads into something that I also wanted to ask about, because Kaggle is online and it's over a period of time.
But it's also, there's a specific ask, though, isn't there? Isn't there a specific question or a specific model that you're being asked to create?
In most cases, yes.
Right. So I think this is this idea of having a unbiased measure is important, but I think it only fits if we had been requesting create a model that does the following, that's a predictive model for refugee migration and distribution of refugee, whatever, something, and there was a particular solution that you were looking for, then maybe there'd be potential for some kind of like unbiased evaluation of everybody would have to turn in a model. Everybody would have to check in a model, and it would be tested against some framework, and a result would be given, and other factors could be weighed in. I think that could be a kind of competition that could be offered. This is a different one where there's more leeway given to a hypothesis, and part of the judging is a hypothesis generation. So it's a different thing. But I see the point about how do you sort of reduce bias, and is a very good point. And so yeah.
So in line with this part of the competition. In STS right now, we're trying to build in classes into the curriculum that teach students how to ask good data questions before they go in, right? So like, what does it mean to like look at a situation and not just like pick randomly out of the air, but to like make informed questions, but also to be a lot more reflective about the limitations of the data and all of that stuff. And is that built into the judging? Like, that sort of thing. And if not, is it something that having somebody from STS on the judging team in the future would be useful?
If we had known, we would have asked.
Well, I should have thought, because you could have been a judge.
We're going to run a class called critical data mapping next semester, and it's all going to be about trying to map data, but not so much to actually produce a map, but to figure out the politics of data in the process. Right?
That's really interesting.
Because the data portal has been designed this way, what can you not know, and all of this stuff, and these are important questions for them to reflect on as they're building it, so that they can say what this data can say and what it can't say and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's this idea of critically looking at the data is kind of built into what we're trying to do with ideas, and that's the exploration.
Right.
And I mean, I've been using the phrase. We've used this in our fall class, and we'll do it again, is don't just do something, sit there and look at your data. Explore first before you start throwing analytics at it. Because it's a terrible temptation to just start using all these neat little screwdrivers and hammers and stuff you got in your toolbox. And that's what scientists and engineers do. Now, STS, you're going to have to tell me what that is.
Science and technology studies.
Oh.
So it's the anthro-socio of science and technology.
Okay.
But we're just now starting to have certain people in the program, myself included, interested in digital infrastructure, and particularly around data.
That's such a one. So much to do there.
One of the teams, I think it was Team 17, looked at was questioning the data itself. Their hypotheses had to do with the actual. Do you actually remember? I can bring up the.
I got it.
You got it?
Well, it's corrupt. The title was corrupt data.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, what can we do with missing data? Do we even trust the data? That was corruption effective.
Yeah, so they were kind of coming at it from this question of what isn't here.
Right.
Yeah, or could you tell whether the country that's reporting this would be the statistical data, whether they're lying about it or not, which we know.
Right. It was sort of a missingness kind of thing. Their hypotheses centered on the sort of the underrepresentation, and are there factors contributing underrepresentation? It was one of the things I would have liked to really push them on, because it is a very interesting question if you really understand the statistical side. Is what you want to have is you want to apply the statistics in such a way that jumps out, and so it requires, hey guys. So
just getting back for a moment to the cable and the online part, do you think there would be value in either combining or having separate or follow-on competitions that have an online component? How do you think that might actually work?
I think it's just totally different kind of competition. We did the one in school dance in earlier, with a set problem. And I know Winslow that was totally different. You know, we just got started right away because we knew the question.
Could you describe that a bit for those of us that
So what they gave us was some data sets from the city of New York. A lot of it was from City Bike, where people would rent the bikes from, and they wanted you to predict or in some way identify the best places to build the bike lanes. So and that bike data, they gave us a certain amount of data from New York City, and you were allowed to use whatever you could find. So like right away you started working on parsing through that data, stuff like that. And everybody had a different approach, but in this one we spent a lot of our time searching for data, hypothesizing. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, but I think it completely changes the data.
Yeah, it's a much narrower definition of what you're going to be doing. We wanted to concentrate more on the project management, the creative aspects of the idea itself, and really the quality of the idea. The judging counted pretty much as the actual execution. So
I don't think it's a bad idea. These two are just very different.
in reviewing the final presentations, I was very pleased to see the depth of the analytics that the teams generally got into. One of our concerns, some teams did it better than others, clearly, but in the fall special projects course, there was a tendency, even to the end of the course, of teams, groups, still kind of just working on different ways to visualize the data. And they're not just presenting data in different ways and not really applying rigorous analysis to the data. And trying to sort of do analyses by looking, okay, which is not analysis. That's not data analytics. And it's very disappointing. But my concern in something like this is people, they spend their time creating pretty pictures and trying to wave hands and draw conclusions from the pretty pictures. And what I was very pleased to see is people actually trying, and some doing a very good job at applying the appropriate analytics to the question.
Yeah, I have to say, in terms of the judging, a lot of the really fancy presentations where they had animations and things like that, that's almost a complete waste of time as far as the judging is concerned, because it's really about, it's an effective way to convey certain information, but to spend the time that it takes to put something like that together in a short competition, unless you're an extreme expert maybe and can really put it together, or you have the resource right at hand, it's kind of it almost detracts at times. Now, we're not going to mark anybody down for it, but it's not as in the eyes of the judges, it's not as valuable as you might think it is.
Yeah. If you ever have the opportunity to see Professor Bennett or Professor Yenner present one of their papers, okay, or present the work or the work of the research team, it's an amazingly dense presentation. It's done very simply, but it's just the important things. And it's possible to convey in a small number of slides exactly what you're trying to prove, how you're doing it, what your methods are, and the result.
Now you did have a pretty good graphics in there. And, my sense of that was that pretty much, I don't think you spent a huge amount of time on that, did you?
It was the format of the graph was we just calculated it by year, and then it did all the analysis. Right, and
that's just a whole bunch of slides, run one after the other.
But no, it was just code that cycled through the data.
Right, I understand.
What essentially did was it just went year to year.
Yeah. But sometimes you can get carried away. And last year I recall to you that I spent a lot of time on this stuff. There
was one team that sort of did these builds. They had a map of the globe, a world map, and they had a lot of these in their presentation where you would see the change over time. You'd see like North America would change colors, and this would, then they go on another slide and they'd show something else that kind of did that. And my reaction to that was, gee, that took them a while to do, and I'm not seeing anything from it. You know, I'm not seeing simple. Just show me a plot. You know, move on.
Unless anybody has some more that they want to talk about on the overall format, I'd like to just spend a little time you might have available. I don't know how long we usually go here, John.
As long as you want.
Well, that's 7 o'clock at my world. I don't know about you guys. But, I'd like to talk a little bit about the data itself. And, your ideas on what other kinds of data if students might be interested in for whatever reason. You guys say something.
Yeah. It might be cool to include like data pertaining just to our school or like colleges in general. So I know like just from what we did last year, it was really interesting for us to like study financial aid because it kind of like worked with what we were like as college students interested in. So we try to predict like which schools got the most financial aid in the years, like which factors we could change to influence that, which was really interesting. So I think maybe something like college students directly like that with financial aid, or maybe like signs in college towns or something like that. But that might be kind of cool like that.
In the fall data analytics course that John and I taught, one of the data sets that was used in there was an RPI data set.
Yeah,
It was polling information from
the freshman survey.
The freshman survey, yeah. And I think the students enjoyed that. There's probably a lot more that can be done with that kind of data. One of the problems is you get a pretty high level sanitized version because of privacy issues.
There was in that so nobody here took that fall course, right? No. The nature of it was after a certain, was it about half the term we were using the same data set, and then the groups, which could be self-forming, we sort of allowed the groups to form based on interests like biology or business, or whatever. Lots of different backgrounds, and part of their task was to go off and find data sets to kind of support their interests, and some found that marketing data. That department store.
It was a department store chain in Europe for retail information.
Right. And so the
RPI data came from, we had an individual from the administration come in to present the data. And he talked about the kinds of things that they'd already found. And Kristen's students from the summer course, one of their groups had worked on that summer. I don't think any of our teams actually used that, did they?
I thought one of them was trying to figure out something. But there was also engineering data from different sources. There was
internet data. Now, this was one of the teams that was in the Lolly case competition. They used Uber bike data from San Francisco, and what they did was very, very similar to what was done in the case competition. And I think they had a lot of fun with that, and it made some interesting discoveries along the way about the data.
It was, yeah. But that was done. I think there were no cases of the sociological data and that sort of thing, and trying to come at it from that angle.
Well, so what I was going to suggest is environmental indicator data, particularly around water quality, which is like the big topic right now, or air quality. Yeah. And then you can easily get projects that link in transportation data, or that link in health data, or even socioeconomic data to make really interesting cases there. There's just like so many different ways you can link with environmental indicators.
Yeah, as long as we're small enough so that we really have to have students from lots of different disciplines competing head on, I think we want to stick to something that is either of general interest or something that nobody has an expertise in, maybe. One of the things that I've thought about is, data on like global warming, or refugee data, social import. big worldwide type problems. Is that something that you think students would be interested in looking at?
Big worldwide problems. So last year we had the idea, we couldn't pull it off because of, but we were thinking of doing it that Enviro Datathon, where we were hoping that we would get data from the Jefferson project. And unfortunately, our partners in that were kind of reluctant to shake loose that data, but I'm not sure how that would have worked. But the idea was we would make the data available, and then I don't know whether we would have focused on a particular part or just what can you do with this data. And we had a lot of ideas, like maybe somebody could do take some of the data which can be turned into a 3D visualization. That was one of the things. We were actually going to have the Datathon downtown in the Gravity Center, so there was a lot of different ideas. We came very close, but we had to pull it off because we had to stop because we couldn't get that data.
Yeah, I mean, and this is so close to earthquake. I mean, if we push it back 2 weeks, we need it during earthquake.
That's actually another question, the timing of it. It was actually a week later this year than last, at least in reference to the semester calendar. Part of that had to do with Passover where it fell this year.
Is there any right time to do this?
That's good with our idea about data sets. I know there's an online game I play called League of Legends, and they have APIs for some of the data they collect. And I know they actually just started recently doing API challenges annually with their, on their site. And I don't know since, trust me, a lot of people are going to play this game. I don't know if they have something similar for games like Hearthstone or like some of the other online games that lots of people here play. But
so what kind of data would it be?
Gameplay data. Rating statistics, visit games, more like what players, like how they set up their characters and stuff like that. So
you're going to have to bear with me because the last video game I played was Pac-Man.
Get off my lawn! So Dominic, I think Dominic did something a few years ago using. He did some study using gameplay data. I think it was early days. He was.
I know
the fourth iteration of his. Fourth iteration out of 20 of his doctoral work. I guess he's gonna surely be at Hamburg or Hanover for that thing.
But I think they're definitely,
He might even be at the summer school. I don't know.
Yeah. What about a challenge using that kind of data to see if you can come up with some winning strategies or some losing strategies?
Well, yeah, I think
I don't know, but I mean, I haven't really delved into what data is available myself, but it's something that came to mind, and I know like they have their own official context. So.
Yeah, so then you get into issues about
Well,
anytime you got a commercial company's data, it's a little bit trickier.
So
in terms of releases and things like that.
In terms of the analytical tools, not the actual platforms, but in terms of the concepts and that sort of thing, were you guys pretty comfortable going into it that you'd be able to apply things in a certain way?
Yeah, I think it's because we all took those courses. That was pretty easy for us, but it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
So we had to do courses, like a lot, but I was able to put things it was helpful to kind of go through it and that made more sense. So it was a good environment like this.
So looking around, your fellow competitors, were there a large number of people from those courses that were in there? Because I didn't actually do that correlation. I didn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't have recognized them except for the students.
Did you see your previous classmates?
Besides Chris and I didn't really whoever else in the class, but who had.
Well, so I knew a number of Kristen Bennett students were scattered around. Yeah.
Well, it's everything from her undergrad, TWed students through to
grad students. Yeah, they were all kind of salted around. They're the ones that had the red ribbons. You could tell.
What about completely different kind of data sets where, I mean, a couple of things that I've read about where analytics are starting to be applied is well, for instance, in literature, where people are using analytics to try and understand writing styles. Or in going back in criminology in old cases and trying to learn more about human behavior and are there any patterns in these things that make any sense? Do you think some things like that might be of interest to students?
A learnathon? A deep learnathon?
The general garden variety RPI student would not have any real strong background unless they just happen to be interested in it.
So this is actually could be kind of cool. This is, it's sort of a, rather than kind of a conventional model that we could argue is what we just did, but you could have a datathon that was focused on, I'm jokingly called a learnathon, but it may actually end up being called that, but something where it's similar to this, but a particular kind of approach would be applied.
I don't think that's a crazy idea. I know there's a significant group of RPI students working right now to get like a programming competition that's specific to AI.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about, where
Yeah.
it's focusing on a specific brand of technology, and then trying to focus on creating a project in that scope. So
Right.
I think it would be interesting. I guess you're just challenging against finding people who have the skill sets to do that.
It would be pretty narrow. Yeah, that you're right. But we tend to, so for example, something that's oriented towards TensorFlow or something like that, a particular kind of a thing, which is specialized, but at the same time, it could be of tremendous interest, and it's one of those crazy things we could probably get support for. But it would, that's interesting. It could be something that maybe could be done in because there is an AI, I don't know if it's right to call it the AI club, but there's an AI organization.
Yeah.
Is Hendra working?
I guess
He's the advisor.
I would hope so.
Set of students would be the people who took the cognitive computing course, Professor Handel.
Yeah.
That and we take two writing styles. It was like writing one of the examples is how do you write a novel of a particular genre,
Yeah.
based on a particular writer's writing style, things like that. The TensorFlow was used. I guess this one here is a good example because they are in the class with me. So they built a chatbot that talks like one of the Futurama characters, and it's not fun for a poster. So this is like one of the presidential candidates, I think, because no one's going to want to look at a paper where you have a Futurama.
Which one?
The debate.
Which candidate? Which?
Which candidate?
Which
Futurama character?
Yeah.
Oh, it's from Futurama, it wasn't.
Oh, no, the president, I talked to a during the poster session. He says they basically took all of the campaign speeches from like the last 40 years
Oh, from everybody.
and fed them in. Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that is being done with literature, where they're asking questions. Well, did Shakespeare really write all these plays, and are there characteristics that might set apart one of them somehow? But to me, you can actually do this with anything. You could, ask the question, what makes a Cezanne? And you start with an image of the data, and you obviously digitize it and go from there. Or newspaper articles.
Yep.
You thought about, addressing the issue of people not having a skill set, and having like a category of people who are actually learning the skill.
Yeah.
You as judges and people in these fields, they're all there, they all have expertise. And I know I would appreciate learning a little bit more about the analytics. That's a strong background. And I did appreciate learning with my team, but it couldn't have been
So it's sort of like different track.
You need to take the fall
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Oh,
What's that? Yeah, that's
You're right. I mean, I'm glad that you had the opportunity to compete and learn a lot of things in spite of not actually having a lot of it in the courses. And that's definitely a good outcome for the competition. And going forward, our hope is that more and more of the students will have the background. But this all has to develop on campus before we have critical mass of students.
Yeah. And
I guess it was more thinking something more specialized, like defensive flow competition.
yeah, and that might be something that would be more successful, more broadly based, like that what we're thinking of might be something that the AI club would participate. They would compete against AI clubs from other universities in some sort of, they may even be doing that. But the idea, but I like the idea or the potential for having multiple tracks. So if you've got students who are have a lot of experience, a lot of coursework or practical experience, that's like an open track, and those that are rookies. I actually don't think you would necessarily need to do graduate versus undergraduate, because undergraduates are doing just fine. Yeah, that's right.
Well, the grad students know too much, that's their problem.
Actually, to be honest, looking at the one presentation, I kind of felt that. I felt like they thought a little bit too hard. Yeah, they overthought the problem. Yeah. All right, go ahead.
We could probably even do like maybe half-hour tech talks during the days.
This
We did that last year. We had a noontime presentation, right? I thought we did, yeah.
So this is not, even last year was not our first Datathon. We did a back in like I think 2010 or 2011. We did a health and health informatics, but it was more. Jim won it, actually. Jim McCusker won it, and it was using, I can't even remember. The data was kind of, well, that was part of it, but also part of it was, well, the hope was that we would use this Elsevier data also.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Elsevier was this. Well, Elsevier, the publisher, was a sponsor of this. We kind of co-did it. We had it out at Pat's Barn, which is a very cool setting. And the idea was that the intent was that all the student teams would be hacking their API and doing great things, but we also had the opportunity to use data that you knew about, and that's pretty much what you did. You did some amazing, as most people did. But the trying to think of that was more of less of an analytics focused thing and more of a kind of a visualization.
Yeah, it was kind of what can you do with this stuff.
Right. But what we did, the reason I brought that up is we specifically, because we knew that people who were involved would not have a lot of expertise about the API, about some of the technologies that we were pushing. We were very heavily pushing semantic web technologies, which a lot of people didn't know. We had little 15-minute tech talks all the way through it, and it was a 24-hour thing. It was a rock solid. All the food. We had video games in the corner. If you wanted to go and play Rock Band, you could go off and play Rock Band. But it was a true 24-hour type of thing, and it was. I think it was pretty cool. I mean, it was really fun to have that sort of off-site setting. Logistically, it was a little complicated, but we had that going on, and so alternative settings is also a question. Well, I mean, we had I think we had to run shuttle buses. It's Pat's Barn. It was not our first choice. It's a wonderful, if you've ever been there, it's a gorgeous facility, but it's not quite so easy. What we really wanted to have was the alumni house up here. Yeah, that would have been a preferred site, but we couldn't get it. Well, we're going to have to. It's going to be so popular. Did anybody else have any other thing? Do you want to say anything? Put in another word for socio-technical? But I think that's it. Thank you all for coming. There's a tiny little bit of food left. There's one more stuffed ziti back there if somebody wants to finish it off. And if you're part of Tetherless World and you haven't signed up yet for your your lightning talk next? Yeah, good. All right.
I ought to sign up for lightning talk. I can give you one on DNA.
You could do a lot of things. You got to keep it to 2 minutes. I can't even say my name in